got that movement. So it's great to be online tonight. Welcome to the Tasmanian and Victorian members and supporters of the ALP, and to those other people that have joined us online tonight. It's great to be here to answer questions from those people online. Some people have started submitting questions already. So we might hand over to Bill to say a few words about what's happening in Parliament this week and where things are up to, and then we'll get stuck into the questions. Bill.
Thanks, Julie. Hello, everyone. It's lovely to have the opportunity to give you an update this week of some of the issues in Parliament. Of course, your questions will go to a lot more than just a brief report. I'd rather keep my initial statements as short as possible, where we can allow discussion. We're fortunate having Julie Collins here, who's the Senior Labor Representative for Tasmania, who can also, I think, add a lot to our discussion. Obviously, though, the government and the Parliament is focused on national security this week, as it has been for the last few weeks. Labor has taken a strong and principled position with regard to action in northern and western Iraq. We've been guided by Gareth Evans, very great cabinet, including Tanya Pritasek, Penny Wong, Stephen Conroy, David Feeney, myself and others. We've been working for our policies, which we then test with broader shadow ministry, that's all the front benches and indeed the Labor caucus. We've got a focus in terms of legislation on national security, which puts the security of Australians first. But we also balance our commitment to national security with protecting our freedoms. Parliamentary oversight and scrutiny of our powers for the executive or government are fundamental to maintaining the quality of our democracy. We've certainly put national politics, national security ahead of politics. By the same token, I was very disappointed to see Julie Bishop, the government's foreign minister, try and attack Labor this week. I think she let herself down and the nation down by engaging in retail politics and when we're talking about issues about the nature of our democracy and our national security. One of the big issues which arises out of national security is the need for social cohesion. A lot of Labor MPs have been out talking to members of our Muslim community and indeed other migrant communities. We're seeing an upsurge in Islamophobia, and indeed we're seeing other migrant groups being denigrated. We're in this hothouse environment about national security. Our social cohesion is fundamental to the sort of country we want to be. We're an immigrant country. Immigration has made our country strong. We've always taken immigrants and we should continue to do so. It's important, therefore, that we understand that stigmatising migrant groups, attacking minorities, poverty, unemployment, these are the issues which threaten social cohesion. And whilst it's appropriate we spend resources on our security agencies, I think it's also important to tackle the causes of social division. And when you hear politicians from the Conservative side stigmatising people and what they wear, that's a big threat to the sort of country we want to be. This week also in Parliament, we've seen a long overdue debate about corporate tax avoidance. We've seen a large proportion of our ASX 200 companies parking money in tax havens and small islands in the West Indies and other jurisdictions. There's a big debate about are all our corporations paying their fair taxes that they should for services and production performed in Australia. It's ironic the government on one hand want to attack sick people going to the doctor. They want to make it harder for pensioners. They want to put cost of living pressure on families. But on the other hand, both in opposition and in government, they're voting against measures which would see corporations, multinational corporations, pay their fair share in Australia. It goes to show you the priorities of this government, that they would, for instance, allow 16,000 Australians who have superannuation account balances north of $2 million, that's right, more than $2 million, that this government is reversing Labor measures and is going to give those people tax-free earnings on their superannuation balances, 16,000 multimillionaires, but by the same token they're going to make over 2 million working women have to pay extra tax on their modest superannuation contributions. So Labor is determined to demonstrate, even in this current debate where national security is taking a fair bit of the attention, we're determined to make sure that the issues of the unfair budget, the broken promises and the rotten priorities of this government are held to account. and that is what is fundamental to what drives Labor. It's a notion that we can only really enjoy progress and prosperity if we have fairness as well. I went on a bit longer in my introduction than I intended, but there's some of the issues and some of the debates going on. Of course, there's a lot more happening than that, and perhaps, Julie, we could questions.
Questions. Thanks, Bill. Our first question is from Glenn McGrath. I don't think it's the cricketer, but I'm sure somebody equally important. And Glenn's question is in relation to the leadership ballot, and he says, what role would you like factions to have in the reform process and in the Reform Party structure? He makes some open commentary about giving members a vote in the leadership as a significant step in rebuilding Labor, provides a way for members to have a direct influence on the party without factional influence. So we've been doing a bit of this in Tassie of recent times, but if you'd like to make a few comments.
Glenn, first of all, and I don't mean to panic you, but your name was McGrath. So I don't know if you come from Ballarat, or if you've got family who come from Ballarat, but we may or may not be related. Of course, it's a meritorious Irish name, so could just be we're fortunate enough to share similar names. In terms of the important point you raise, factions are part of the Labor Party. People will organise around ideas and to some extent personalities. But what we've got to do is make sure that people understand they join the Labor Party first, not a faction. And we need to be a membership-based party, not a faction-based party. Factions exist in all walks of politics and life, from football clubs to the Liberal Party to business. But it is really important people look at issues and ideas and indeed candidates for pre-selection based on what's the best idea or the most meritorious idea, not whether or not someone on the left or the right or any other faction has told me how to vote. So we do need to make sure that we get the best quality candidates. We need to make sure that people who are not in any faction feel a chance to have an input in a policy, and it's not just decided by 2 or 3 people. Now, I see promising signs in the Labor Party in New South Wales community pre-selections. You generously said that the leadership ballot was a step forward, and I agree. I see a recognition that the Labor Party is not just belonging to certain economic institutions, but it should be the political party for all Australians. So I think the factions can play a positive role, but we can't afford to have people say that the Labor Party must just stay as it is, because we need to be a much bigger mass-based party, and some people probably have to give up some power to allow more people to join and more people to have a say.
And in Tassie, we've just recently had a membership ballot for half the delegates to our ALP National Conference that's coming up next year, and they've been directly selected by the party membership.
Right.
So that's already happening, and I know that other states are needing to do the same. The other thing that I might say is that having been a member of the Labor Party for a little while now, you do find that people of like mind do tend to group together in any organisation. So it is a natural thing that occurs in any party. So it has been interesting to see how it works.
What's important
is people's ability to have a say.
Is that you have a say, but you don't bother. You don't join the left or the right.
Sure.
Join the Labor Party.
Yeah.
And that's got to guide the way we make decisions.
All right, and we'll move on to our second question so we can get through a few more. Carl makes it smart. His question is, P and Ash promised 2 million jobs. He hasn't delivered anything but job losses. What will you do to actually produce jobs?
Well, can't be right that Abbott promised jobs and he's done a shocking job of it. We've seen unemployment rise to levels that we haven't seen in 10 years. In fact, the last time unemployment was as high as it is now, Tony Abbott was employment minister. We're seeing a lot of blue-collar jobs, a lot of manufacturing jobs go. There's no plan for this government. They don't seem to feel inclined to fight for blue-collar jobs either. In terms of what Labor will do, we'll unveil our policies close to the election, but some of the principles that will guide us. We have to be a party that goes for growth. But we have to also ensure that we have fairness. There's been more interesting work released in recent weeks and months, which shows that a nation which has less inequality is a more prosperous nation. So fairness is part of an economic formula, and it's part of Labor's DNA to see progress in this country. So fairness and growth need to be part of what we do to generate jobs. I also think we have to have a much greater priority on science. If we are a nation who values science, technology, engineering, mathematics, we value innovation, then what we will see is the generation of more jobs. Someone, there was a columnist who wrote in the New York Times not too long ago and said that there's about 5 billion of us on the planet who are over the age of 16. There's about 1.2 billion good jobs. A good job is a job which has more than 30 hours a week. This is how they defined it. More than 30 hours a week. Regular work that people have some control over the tasks. Because it was America, they said there should also be decent retirement planning. We have superannuation, there should be decent healthcare. We have Medicare, or as we do currently. And it also should be a safe job. And you should have, as I said, regular hours. This is our challenge. We're competing not Tasmania and Western Australia or Sydney and Melbourne. We're competing with the rest of the world. We can't go down the food chain in terms of low-paid jobs because there'll always be some jurisdiction in the world who'll pay lower than what people are willing to work for here. And we shouldn't go that way. It's all about education. It's all about productive infrastructure. It's all about treating women equally and getting women the opportunity to participate. It's all about science and innovation. It's about going for the high ground. And you'll see more detail.
And we're obviously, as Shadow Ministers, working on that at the moment as we lead up to our ALP National Conference about what our policy platform might look like, but also starting to think about our election policy, consult with stakeholders and people in the community about what our policies might look like. I know I've been working on youth unemployment with Shadow Ministers Macklin and O'Connor because we see that that's a really serious issue, particularly in regional Victoria and regional Tasmania. There are pockets of high youth unemployment. So we're really committed and we've been working really hard on trying to develop policies about how we might address that too. So there's been a fair bit going on in terms of development of policy.
Well, there has been, and we welcome all of your ideas for future economic policies. This is why we want your involvement and your ideas.
So Rose Denham is our next question. Labor constantly refers to families only. 10 to 15% of the population who are single want to know why we don't matter to Labor.
Oh, thanks, Rose. I'm acutely aware that the language that political parties use can include or exclude. So you'll find in what we talk about, I just don't talk about families. The nuclear family, mum and dad, 2 kids and a dog behind a white picket fence, only describes a portion of our community. There's single parent families, there's blended families, there's adults without children, there's single people. So you're right, Labor always needs to make sure that we talk about everyone, not just a particular subset or a particular stereotype. So I appreciate your question, but I also, as Tony Jones said, almost take it as a comment, and it's something which we are mindful of, but we can always keep it at the front of our mind.
And obviously families, as you say, come in all shapes and sizes, and we should really be paying attention to that in our language. So.
Yeah, that's important. Thanks, Rose.
All right. Glenn Thompson is our next question. Defence Minister Johnson said in Parliament today that the government has no obligation to build our subs in South Australia. So what are your views? You've obviously been very clear on this. You've been to South Australia with our members over there. You've been talking to some of the workers who will be affected by this decision. It's clearly a broken promise by the government.
At the last election, before the last election, the Abbott opposition promised that they would build 12 submarines in South Australia. Well, they didn't say they'll build part of it. They didn't say they'd do some of the equipment. They said they would build 12 submarines in South Australia. This is a government that couldn't lie straight in bed. After the election, they've just broken that promise. The fact that the Liberal Defence Minister is walking away from it, Tony Abbott's walking away from it, I think is a shocking breach of faith. At a deeper level, people say, well, should we be building submarines? Is that what we're good at? A previous Labor government made the decision to build submarines in Australia in 1988. We built 6 submarines. We've had, in the next 20 years, we're due to build 48 naval vessels. I think it is legitimate that all things being equal, Australian taxpayers who are going to pay for ships and submarines anyway should see that money expended wherever possible in Australia. A lot of defence experts who say Australia should build these submarines. I think we just need to keep the pressure and stand up for skilled jobs. This industry generates a lot of innovation, a lot of small business. In South Australia, it's the largest single employer of apprentices. It generates, I think, much more economic opportunity for Australia than we would gain if we simply offshore this decision.
It's a very important question, particularly for those workers in South Australia who are relying on those subsidies when they were promised. So our next question is about Tasmania, of course, my home state. Alan Maguire says, Tasmania has historically been a safe state for the ALP until the most recent election. Do you feel the ALP can regain support? I obviously do feel we can, and I've been working hard in some of those other seats, particularly the three seats held by Liberals. And I know for a fact that the federal budget, hasn't gone down very well in Tasmania. So I'll hand over to you, Bill. You've been down to Tassie recently. We've been on the West Coast together, talking to locals about jobs on the West Coast, and you've been also up on the North West Coast recently.
Well, I think the three federal Liberal MPs out of Tasmania at the moment are just hopeless. They never stand up for Tasmania. Yes, so I think Labor can regain the seats. We should never regard any regional seat as safe, though. But you're right, I think that there's a lot of the story of Tasmania is a story that Labor's best placed to help. A lot of the projects which this government are enacting are ones which Labor announced and proposed. Tasmania's a great place to live, and we should be supporting its economic growth and development. Tasmania's got a good story to tell, from hydro, electricity, through to tourism, also through to its food industries, through to its services, through to its quality of life. And it's also got a natural resources sector, a mining industry, which as global prices improve will also be viable. So I think the story's bright. All we need to do is make sure that we get the best possible candidates and make the case. Now, we're very fortunate that we have Julie and take Julie's counsel most seriously when it comes to forming policy in Tasmania. I had the opportunity when I was a union representative to spend a lot of time in Tasmania, not just Beaconsfield, but
it was very odd when we were in Queenstown. A gentleman came up to you that from when you were down there previously and shook your hand and said, "Oh, it's great to have you back in Tassie, Bill." I don't know how long it had been since you'd seen him.
12 years since I'd seen him, but we had a campaign to make sure that miners, underground miners, had reasonable and structured hours of work, not unfair, unsafe hours. And we campaigned then for that. And anyway, I think Tasmania's got a lot going for it.
And the only thing the Liberals have done, of course, is pull money out. We've seen them pull $100 million out of the minimum highway, which we know most Tasmanians want fixed because there have been far too many fatal accidents. So Labor committed $500 million, and the Libs have taken $100 million out of that. We have been calling on the federal government to have a dedicated jobs plan for Tasmania and to work with the state government because we know jobs is the biggest issue going in Tassie at the moment.
Yeah.
So our next question is from Shauna Hicks. I'd like to know what your party plans to do to combat family violence. Of course, as a former Minister for Women, I've been very passionate about this, and I did a lot of work on getting the states and the territories to sign up for our national plan to reduce violence against women and their children. I also, with the Victorian State Minister at the time, set up the foundation in Victoria to reduce violence against women and their children, and that's now called Our Watch and headed up by Natasha Stockdale. So it actually was great to be in government to be able to actually do some things that will make a big difference long term when it comes to the family violence stuff. Obviously, states have a lot of service delivery role, but as a Commonwealth, we certainly played a lead role, and I was very pleased to be able to do that when we were in government. I know that you too have been very passionate about it, Bill. We've had chats about family violence in the past, and you've raised the issue nationally many times before.
Julie's been modest. She and her colleagues and the previous government did a lot in terms of making it a national issue. I firmly believe family violence is a real scourge, and it's happening. The statistics are terrible. That approximately one woman every week will be killed by a partner or former partner or someone who says that they love them is terrible. It's a major cause of homelessness. It's an unacceptable feature of Australian society. So Julie's mentioned some of the work which Labor has done and will do. I also think that we need to recognise it's not just a police issue, because you can't arrest your way out of this, and it's certainly not just a women's issue. It is not right that in my home state of Melbourne, a woman is more likely, or as likely, in fact more likely to be assaulted at home than on the high street. You should be safest at home. And so I think there's a role here for the National Parliament to put pressure and to create expectation that family violence is a national issue, and we shouldn't stereotype it for anything less than that. It's important.
And if the social issues aren't bad enough, there's of course the economic cost to the country.
Yeah.
About a third of all police call-outs family violence related, and if we could eliminate it, we would add about $13 billion to the economy. That's what it's costing in Australia at the moment. It's really significant.
I was able as Workplace Relations Minister to help make it one of the reasons why you can take leave if you're the victim of family violence. And so it's a workplace issue too. And it's going to require a lot of effort, but I do fundamentally believe that Labor needs to be a brave political party, so we need to tackle this. It's not a taboo topic, it's a real topic, and there are real victims and real repercussions from it, and we need to do everything we can to prevent it. I'm sure we can all do better.
All right, so next question's from Lawrence Rowland, and he's got a question about the NBN, which is interesting, given, of course, the Liberals' policy on that at the moment. We also know this is another commitment in Tasmania that was broken by Malcolm Turnbull. He came down to our state in the election campaign and said that there'd be no difference between Labor and Liberals' policy if they got elected. Of course, there is a big difference because people are now no longer getting fibre to their home, they're only getting it to the node, when they were all promised fibre to the home, and we were going to be the first state rolled out, and that's now no longer happening. So this question really is looking into the future, talking about what will our policy look like if we win in 2016 when it comes to the NBN.
Well, we haven't finalised our policy, but I would submit to you Labor's record. Just as you want to have roads which can let people travel at 100 kilometres an hour rather than single lane roads at 60 kilometres, our NBN is exactly the choice, the same sort of choice we make when it comes to the digital economy. So Labor is the inspiration for the NBN. I'm worried that Malcolm Turnbull is gutting it. He's getting his mates to do so-called expert reports which lower our expectations. There's no way that Australia can be the country it potentially can be, competing with the rest of the world, if we take policies to the election, or allow the Liberals to have policies which basically give us second-class digital outcomes.
Sure. And of course we know how important it is to the economy, and that's why we had our policy in the first place.
I mean, how does a small business compete with a small business in another country if we can't bid for work, or if we can't take the tenders, or if we can't have economic activity, because the NBN that we operate on is just inferior.
And the other revelations this week that were pointed out by Shadow Minister Clare in relation to the fact that they might have disparity in pricing for people that live in the cities versus people in regional and rural Australia. Yeah. So I know that that's really concerning for us as a party, particularly those people that live in regional and rural Australia, having to pay more when they've already got tyranny of distance as an issue for them has been pretty important. So our next question is from Abdulka Yusuf, and his question is in terms of national security and about how we balance national security and the need for democratic rights of our citizens. You obviously touched on that a fair bit in your opening remarks, and it's topical that you look at the House tomorrow, the bill, to be debated. It's obviously been through the Senate, so I don't know if any of you want to add, Bill, further to your comments earlier.
Well, I'll just say this. I think there is a genuine threat from a very small group of people who've got misguided views, who may be vulnerable people, who may feel that the only way they can solve problems is through going to Syria or Iraq, or indeed committing illegal acts here. But I've got to say, it is a small number of people. Now, that doesn't mean we shouldn't be doing everything we can to prevent that, and Labor obviously stands for the safety of our citizens. But you raise a really important point. We do not need to do this at the cost of our basic democratic freedoms. So Labor will be constructive. We won't play politics, but we have insisted that there be a transparent process to review the existing legislation in Parliament, where we can get public submissions, not just from security agencies, but from people who are guardians of the quality of our democracy. And for us, it is about making sure this Parliament does commit to the scrutiny and the checking and the double checking. Labor's no blank check on this matter. We won't be unreasonable, but we will keep in mind the twin goals, both the quality of democracy we have and the freedoms individuals enjoy, and the need for national security. Australia is a clever enough country to look at this balance right, and Labor will certainly have that as the guiding principles for what we do in coming days, weeks and months.
Okay, and our next question is one I know that's very dear to you, given the work that you did with the Parliamentary Secretary, and it's about the NDIS, and it comes from Janine Roberts. Under the NDIS, Abbott has done a study and now concluded advocacy only to be done by the big organisations with disabled people losing their voice. Do you agree with that, or do you want to make some comments
The Abbott
about the
government-
NDIS and how it's going to roll
The
out?
Abbott government doesn't like people telling them what they don't want to hear. We've seen that, as you know, the Abbott government's got no time for climate scientists. They don't seem to like economists very much. They certainly don't like trade unions. You'd think they don't appear like people going to the doctor too often. That's a separate one, I guess. But in terms of disability advocacy, when I was the junior minister for that area, we increased the funding. People with disabilities have a voice and be empowered in the quality and the nature of the services they're provided. So this is fundamental. And if we don't have an effective national disability insurance scheme, the voice of the consumers, people with disabilities and their families, has to be heard. How on earth can you either? The whole point of the National Disability Insurance Scheme is to move the notion of disability care from being a charity to being a consumer-based service, where the people receiving the services are at the centre of decision-making. You take advocacy out of the situation. What you then have is you basically got charity by another name. Empowerment of people is fundamental to quality of life for people.
So true, so true. Our next question's from Shane Piper, and is one about renewable energy, particularly important in Tasmania, given our hydroelectricity system and the fact that we're trying to get a few wind farms up at the moment. The question is, what will you do to stop Abbott's sabotage of the renewable energy industry, which has already begun to create many new jobs? And of course, it's been around for quite some time and growing massively now in Australia.
Abbott government is a sovereign risk to the renewable energy industry in Australia, just so people know some of the headline numbers, because we need you to talk to other people about this. It's in an industry which has invested over $20 billion. It's generated thousands of jobs. There are 1.2 million Australian households with solar energy, which allows them cheaper energy prices on their roofs. So this is an industry with mandated targets, which has created, I think, a bright prospect in terms of sustainability, energy prices, jobs, innovation. I mean, it is crazy that Germany has 1/3 of the sunlight of Australia, yet its solar industry is 3 times the size of Australia. But this Abbott government just wants to turn us back into a quarry and a financial services sector. It's not acceptable. So what's happened is there's a renewable energy target for in the 2 levels. There's for households, small scale, and then there's the larger renewable energy target. The government has commissioned a report by some people. The report's come down and basically proposed trashing the renewable energy targets. Labor is absolutely against that. The government said they want to be bipartisan. We agree with bipartisanship, but again, we're not a blank check. So we've said to the government, if you agree that you're not going to trash the industry, we'll sit down and talk to you about what the future should look like. But if you insist upon keeping on the table wrecking the industry, well, then you have a meeting all on your own, because Labor will stand up for renewable energy.
And it's clear the coalition, of course, is divided on the issue. They're all sort of got different positions, and they're all sort of breaking out all over the place with different positions. So I don't think the government actually has a clear direction it wants to go, other than the leadership, obviously, by putting it forward and each other.
Well, I think this government is a government of climate skeptics for climate skeptics. You know, when I was in northwestern Tasmania, I met with people who wanted to build wind farms. And Joe Hockey says that wind farms make him sick. I don't know how we have policy around what makes Joe Hockey world sick. His budgets make a lot of people sick, you know. They're a most unscientific government. And what we're doing is holding up jobs and investment in the west coast of Tasmania, because this is a government who doesn't understand what the future looks like.
All right, our next question is an interesting one, given what's just happened in Scotland recently. It's from Harrison Broughton. He says, does Labor have plans to reduce the voting age to 16 years, like they have in Scotland? I'm terribly eager to vote as soon as possible. I'm assuming Harrison is around the age of 16.
So we don't have any immediate plans to lower the voting age, although I was really interested to see the Scottish referendum that the voting age was lowered to 16. We're certainly going to get some work done about what was the implication. I think encouraging people under the age of 18 to register to vote, to be involved in politics is important. We don't have any current plans, but on the other hand, Certainly I intend to get some further information about what it looked like in Scotland, and I certainly read some of the reports, and you can see that the 16 and 17-year-olds were most engaged.
I have to say, as a parent of teenage children, I know that they'd be very keen to get their voting rights as soon as possible. But we have had some debates in Tasmania about 16-year-olds voting in the party. Young people who are committed enough to come and join the ALP are obviously very passionate, very engaged, who actually want to vote within the ALP as we're opening up the party more. So it's been an interesting discussion, and I don't know whether other branches have had those discussions, but certainly an interesting topic. So our next question is from Michelle, sorry. Will Labor restore funding to the ABC?
We haven't finalised our policy, but let me say this. We think the ABC should be wholly funded. We don't support the cuts that this current government are making. The ABC plays a really important role in Australia. It adds to the diversity of voices. It certainly adds to Australian content. It adds to, I think, greater depth in current affairs and news reporting. It also serves regional Australia in a fantastic way.
Particularly in national emergencies, I know that when the Denali fires were in Tasmania, they play a really important role on the ABC giving local updates. I know the same was true of Queensland floods. So they can be really, really important, and they need the resources and to make sure they've got the resources during those natural disasters. So.
Well, certainly the case of the ABC is they're going to fare a lot better under Labor than Liberal. I've just been meeting with one of the unions that represents people at the ABC. There's a lot of fear in the ABC. They can't be seen to criticise the government. The role of an independent national broadcaster is fundamental to democracy. It's fundamental to diversity of voices. It's fundamental to the range of ideas we hear. So Labor definitely friends the ABC in a way which the Liberals will never, ever be.
That's so true, so true. So Faye Maglin has written into us about asylum seekers and refugees, and her question is, when and how will you stop cruelty to asylum seekers and refugees? This is obviously a very difficult question, and I know that many of us in the Labor Party have really struggled with what the right thing to do is, because of course there's no easy solution to this very difficult subject when it comes to making sure that we treat everybody humanely, but we also keep them all very safe.
Hey, thanks for your question. By the way, I should have said thanks for everyone's question before then too, in case you want to like But this whole debate about refugees has, I think, been contaminated by dog whistles and conservative catcalling for too long. We're an immigrant nation. Other than Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, all of our parents or grandparents or great-grandparents came here. Some of my relatives came here as convicts. So I don't know how that passed the current test of my ancestors, who knows. But the reality is that immigration is what makes Australia great. Now, I know you asked where refugees not come to that, but I just want to set up that Labor must always be the party of immigration. The way our population grows is through natural birth and, of course, immigration. We need to recognise that immigration and multiculturalism have contributed to the quality of this country. I don't know about you, Faye, I guess you're the same as me in this. I'm proud of the fact that nearly 27 in every 100 Australians, nearly 27 in every 100 Australians, were born overseas. The electorate I represent, the northwestern suburbs of Melbourne, is such a fantastic place because it's got people from 100 different nations, cultures, languages, where I live and where my family live. So immigration is a good thing, full stop. Then when we look at where we get our immigrants from, we need family reunion, we need skilled migration, and we need to have provision for taking refugees. We need to not demonise refugees or people seeking. They're people who want to come to Australia as to having base motives. Some of the countries that some of our immigrants and refugees come from, if I was living there, I would do anything I could to get my family here. So I think when we see commentators and some of the conservative media, and indeed even a few of the Greens who say this country is a frail continent, can't take any more people, we need to rebut that logic and that language. Australia is not full. But of course we need to make sure that each year as our population grows, as a combination of immigration, natural birth, We do it in a manner which means we can cope. We need to make sure that our infrastructure's right, that our housing's there, that we have opportunities for health and schools for people who come here. It is important, therefore, that when we take refugees, that we make sure that they can come here safely. It is true that at the height of people smuggling operations, hundreds of people were drowning at sea. Put this another way, we need to have regional processing of our refugees so that people don't die on the journey coming to Australia. I don't begrudge people wanting to come here. I don't think it makes it illegal. But what I do get is that, for instance, to use an analogy, we just had the AFL Grand Final last weekend. 100,000 people went there. If you knew that 4,000 people either wouldn't get there or may not come home safely, we'd consider cancelling the game. We're not going to cancel Australia, but we do need to make sure that as we get refugees to Australia, it happens in a safe way. That also means that we've got refugees currently in Australia in limbo under the current government's laws. We need to make sure that they have the opportunity to have work rights. We need to make sure there's a pathway to citizenship for them. I get that this is a complex issue. I understand fundamentally that people of goodwill can draw different conclusions. But in the Labor I lead and the team, including Joy, we are united by the view that refugees should be made welcome and not demonised or stigmatised. And that goes for integration generally.
Okay, and our next question is an easy one to answer. It's a long question, but I think the response will be quite short. It's from Pam Walker. She's really concerned about the changes to unemployment benefits proposed by the government, where a young person under 30 will have to wait for 6 months before they can receive the benefit. What's Labor's position on this issue?
Giving it thumbs down.
Yeah.
There's no way we're going to vote for that. We called it out at the time of the budget. Even a Liberal senator chairing the Human Rights Committee said that he believed that the government's policy was incompatible with people who might not be discriminated against on the basis of age. It's a terrible policy. I think even Labor's committees, Clive Palmer and some of the Fox Bench, vote against this measure. So we will fight this with every breath in our body. We do not need an American-style underclass in Australia. The idea that we tell people under the age of 30 that you will have no income for 6 months is, I think, probably the single individual hardest measure in this unfair budget. This is just the government who want to beat up on what they would stigmatise as dole grudges. People say, what does Labor stand for? We stand for making sure that people don't get stigmatised because they haven't got a job. We want to help them find a job, but we certainly are not going to be complicit in starving people.
And the really good thing about that, of course, is everybody you talk to out in the community when you're out and about agree that no fair-minded Australian would agree with this policy. We've got no idea where it came from other than ideologically. So it's
this Kevin Andrews was obviously backgrounding the Sunday newspapers to say, well, it was a brainchild.
Today, apparently it was.
Yeah, I tell you, they're running a million miles from this. They love the cheap politics of it, but as more and more people are speaking out against it, it's looking increasingly friendless, a bit like Joe Hockey at a cabinet meeting.
All right, our next question is from Daniel Hoy. He says, with the Australian manufacturing industry in tatters and the impending closure of the Victorian motor vehicle manufacturing industry, how is Labor going to assist and restore the confidence of average Joe Blow to get another job? And of course, you also talked about this earlier when you talked about how we're going to try and create jobs in our government.
A lot of it comes down to, on one hand, science and innovation, on the other hand, encouraging small business and new startups, and thirdly, and perhaps even most importantly of all of these factors, training and retraining. We're living longer than ever before. The truth of the matter is that one job for life is increasingly a memory, not a future plan. So we need to make sure that people are properly funded to go to TAFE, get diplomas, or indeed go to university. That's what makes the government's changes to higher education and training so stupid. But when we get to manufacturing now, I must stress, we still have a lot of manufacturing in Australia. What manufacturing needs is greater support for starting up, a better trained workforce, the opportunity to invest in research and development. There's plenty that we can do to help manufacturing in this country. But let's face it, the federal government from the car industry, to the aluminium industry, to airline maintenance, to shipbuilding, they are the worst news that manufacturing has had in a very long time.
That's so true. We were talking about that 7 years ago, so it's terrible. But can I thank you, Bill, for being so frank with people tonight? Can I thank all those people that sent in questions? That's all we've got time for, unfortunately. I know that many people are very keen to ask more and more questions. Because this won't be the last time that you get to go online and chat to people, but two very, very wide-ranging questions tonight. I think our people out there have asked a variety of questions. Some of them put us on the spot a little bit, maybe, although you answered them very casually. So thanks, everyone, for tuning in tonight. I don't know if you want to say anything.
No, just say two or three little things in finishing. One is we got so many questions. If you think that a question and answer takes about 3 minutes, we'll be here until next Friday to see the questions we've got. So I appreciate everyone who's sent them in. Please keep in touch with us. Your views are important. The second thing I want to make is, if you're not a member of the Labor Party, please join. If you are a member of the Labor Party, please ask a friend to join. Our membership's gone up in the last year, approximately 10,000, 40,000, 50,000. Our challenge is to make sure that Australians realise that politics is not disconnected from their ordinary life. What we need to do in the next election is actually reinvigorate people's optimism and being involved in politics to change things. And it's certainly no opposition to having our views. So please, if you know someone who's interested, please ask them to join. If you're not a member of the Labor Party, we want you. No excuses now. You can't say someone hasn't asked you, I just did. And finally, can I just promise you that the Labor Party will not only be a strong opposition, we will not only hold the government to account, but at the next election, we will offer a positive view of the future. We think that Australia's best days are ahead of it. We don't see our definition of success being monuments or indeed cuts. We think success is when a student from working class background can get to university. We think it's when an unemployed person finds a job. We think it's when an older Australian has to dip all in their superannuation balance so that we don't retire and retire poor. It's when someone waiting for Paddle at our surgery doesn't have to wait 230 days to think of work within 90 days. We think it's when this person with a great idea for small business can get that started. And we need to party with the people. It is certainly in your view to help us defeat the other government and restore Australia to a brighter, happier trajectory based upon optimism and hope about the future, not a desire to stay as we are.
I guess that's it then. Good night, everyone, and thanks again for posting this on the ultimate online sometime in the future.